Session is Saving Science in India. This session is chaired by Anand Ranganathan. We will have with us Alok Kumar, Neeraj Rai and Abhidit Chavda.
Hi, good evening. It's a great pleasure to be here, and this is the fourth session I'm chairing. In all three previous sessions, I have distributed Mysore Pak. I have run out of Mysore Pak. And I have found that whenever Mysore Pak has been distributed, the audience has been absolutely lovely, been very caring. They've asked all the right questions, very gentle. But this time, I don't have any Mysore Pak. So please bear with us. This session is quite special because, unfortunately, Anirban Da couldn't be here with us. So we have all four of us are scientists, practicing scientists. So we might go into a direction which possibly has to be reined in by me. So please pardon me, gentlemen. We thought we had two sessions. One was Saving the Science of India that we had yesterday. It was wonderful. And this one would be more pertinent to the contemporary times, as well as to the, I dare say, the government and the politicians. And that was one of the reasons why we thought we should have Anirban Ganguly, because he is, in many ways, he represents the government as well. Unfortunately, he couldn't be there. So we can probably have a very freewheeling discussion as to how the hell do we save science in India? Does it need to be saved, if at all, or not? I thought we would split it into various domains as we move along. We can talk about the physical sciences, the chemical sciences, the earth sciences, and we can actually also go up to the boundary, as Neeraj is now currently working on, really interface of archaeology, history, and population genetics. So it really is that what we're finding is that the science, as always, is broadening or spreading its tentacles, if you want to be a little bit scary, into domains that were not very well meshed into what we thought science was or should be practiced barely 20, 30, 40 years ago. So let me begin by actually asking Neeraj, because he is the man of the moment. He is the he's the author of the landmark cell paper of the Rakhi Gari DNA. Neeraj, do you believe that science in India needs to be saved? And B, have you personally seen any improvement in the last decade or so? And C, if it indeed it needs to be saved, what needs to be done for it to be saved?
Significantly. For example, when I started doing my PhD in biological sciences in a reputed institute, hello. That institute was heavily funded, and we had never encountered any kind of funding issues. And we have freely, I have freely worked on what I wanted to work on. And then after my PhD, I moved my field, and I started working with the historians and archaeologists. When I started traveling to Deccan College, Pune, which is a world-renowned archaeological institute, and there I have realized the fund crisis. They used to get about 5 to 6 lakh per annum budget for the excavation. And there you'll find there are 40 faculties are there, and they divide the funds. And each faculty has end up with some 4,000-5,000 rupees for the excavation. And this is such a...
I need to interrupt you because this needs to be clarified for the audience and it has to sink in. You have this landmark cell paper that has been published that from India, hardly one gets published every year or 2 years. And now what you're saying is that the iconic Institute of Archaeology in India gets a budget that is, when distributed to all its faculty, results in 5,000 rupees per faculty.
It's true.
So it's not just saving science in India. Something has to be done even way beyond
exactly.
that. Maybe we need to get a hat and kind of do a collection out here.
When I was there, physically I was there at Rakhi Gadi site, such an important site, World Heritage site. and that site has given a lot of wonderful data, and that site has potential to change the history, our history, change our view, understanding. That site has given like everything. And when I was there, the archaeologists, they were struggling for to pay the laborers. We have arranged the fundings, and the excavation has taken place, but it was very tough time. We know that the Rakhigadi site was expanded in about 500 hectares, and there were a lot of hidden treasures are still there. But the archaeologists, they were able to excavate 1% of the potential site, and from there we have collected samples and we have worked on those samples. So the sampling was the archaeological science, and when we started working, that was the biological science. For that we had funding, but we can't use that funding for the archaeological purpose. So this kind of biasness is there. This as a gap is there. That gap should be filled.
Even under the table, you can't give some to the archaeologists.
Not money, but definitely some scotch bottles. Yeah.
Right, but I hope you're able to get the gravity of the situation. I mean, this paper, when it came out, it has resulted in about 20 or 30, opinion pieces in various publications. It has reached the whole of the world. Every scientific journal or publication is discussing this work. And here Neeraj is telling me that the very site from where the samples have come, the people who are working there, they don't have enough money to pay the laborers.
Yeah. Not only site, but the archaeological collections, museums, they don't have air condition. So now we have written a grant, and that grant is going to come. Now we are going to install some air conditions in their museum.
This is why we wanted Anirban, and I hope it was pure coincidence or accident that he's not here. But this is the tragedy of this country, that people tom-tom the results, the politicians tom-tom the results, but the huge labor that goes on before the publication, those 2 years, these scientists are on their own with 5,000 rupees as a budget. I will come back to that rather very disturbing incident that you've narrated, Neeraj, but I want to go to Abhijit, because he is a theoretical scientist. Now, it is often the grouse of the experimental scientists that we don't get enough budget. We don't, we like the poor guy is always begging, and Alok is going to, echo that fact. I want to ask Abhijit, because obviously theoretical sciences does not require the kind of budget as wet sciences do. Do you think there is a vast difference in the quality of the theoretical research as opposed to the wet research that India does?
I'm not sure there is.
Okay, then you have to explain why.
Yeah, indeed, yes. The thing is, if you look at the research from the experimental sciences, you need equipment for that. And for theoretical physics, for example, you don't need any equipment. You just need your mind, and you need the right atmosphere, the right environment. And in the case of theoretical physics, the right environment and the right atmosphere is the most important thing. Now, if you are a scientist and you have a bunch of bureaucratic restrictions on you, you need to file reports, you need to do certain things, then it disturbs you, When you are a theoretician, you need a long period of time in which you can work undisturbed. And this sort of thing is not real. This environment, this understanding is not present in India, right? So what you get is that people telling you what to do. I mean, if you work in an institution, you will have a boss, and the boss will give you the direction that this is what you need to work on. It may or may not match your aptitudes, your tastes, your likings, but so that's what happens. So that's one of the reasons why theoretical physics is not really catching up in India. I mean, you have a couple of institutes like the IISc is there. You have the TIFR in Mumbai, and you have a few such institutions. But if you look at the volume of high quality papers, which is one of the benchmarks, then you don't really see that much from India. You will see lots of good quality papers being published by Indians abroad in theoretical physics. But from what I see, it's not really picking up in India, and that's one of the reasons why, I would say.
I'm sorry to play devil's advocate, because I've always actually wondered about this. When you are in a position to do science and you don't have the funding for it, you choose a branch of science, for example, theoretical sciences, where you need, as you said, your brain and a pen and a paper and maybe a good computer. Why then? I mean, I'm sorry to be, again, I apologize because, what you said is probably indeed true. But some would say it is nitpicking because at the end of the day, when you're complaining about bureaucracy, it shouldn't really disturb, or does it really disturb to an extent that you're not able to produce the quality that is expected of a theoretical science? I mean, I can turn around and say that one of the greatest years in the life of a scientist was Annus Mirabilis, I think it's called, in 1905, when Einstein, working at a patent office, being disturbed by maybe 2,000 bureaucrats, ended up coming up with 5 landmark scientific discoveries.
Well, everyone's not Einstein, first of all.
Yes, everyone's not an Einstein, but...
And the thing is that we also have to look at the quality of the education system. Look at the quality of the average Indian PhD. There are some genuinely good scientists and researchers that come through the system. But let's take a look at the quality of human capital we are producing, right? The quality of the production line that we have, which starts all the way from grade school, goes through middle school, high school, college, university. What sort of people are we producing? What are the filters that we have that are meant to winnow out the ones who are not supposed to do physics, who are not meant to do theoretical physics, and the ones that are being pushed through, and the ones who are going on to reach the master's level and the PhD level. The thing is that in this country, everybody gets a master's degree. The term master has no meaning anymore, right? Everybody gets a master's degree because that's what you need to get a job. And some of them who don't get jobs or whatever, they go, in some cases it's like that. They go on to do the PhD because you get funding, etc. So the quality of the PhDs that we have is honestly not really good. I mean, if you look at the value of the Indian PhD versus the value of a US PhD or somewhere else, you immediately know the difference, right? So that is also one of the contributing factors as to why we don't have good theoretical physics or any other discipline research being done in India.
So what you say, Abhijit, before I bring Alok in, I just want to break up what you're saying, is quite worrying because if a scientist complains of less budget, you can give him or her more money and then expect good quality. But here what you're saying is that the quality of a theoretical scientist's output cannot improve unless you improve the whole setup.
That is true. That is very true. The system, the education system is fundamentally broken. It is broken. And nothing's going to change until we make some fundamental reformative changes. Because if you look at the education system...
But Abhijit, we're not going to make fundamental
changes. We need to. Let me give you the example of China.
Name 2 fundamental changes that we need to make.
First of all, we need to stop emphasizing on rote memorization, and we need to emphasize on actually learning and understanding things. And secondly, we have the system of exams once a year, and exams that follow the old 19th century colonial pattern. Why can't we make it possible for students to give exams any day of their choosing online, and an exam that actually tests their understanding of the subject instead of how fast they can write and how many papers they can fill up with whatever rubbish they write. These are the 2 fundamental changes we need to make.
Alokda, you wanted to come in?
So I think you brought up a very nice topic. But first of all, I'd say that as far as I am concerned, I just came back to India a couple of years ago, and my institute has really treated me well. So we have gotten a lot
You're just saying that because you're worried about your... Is there anyone in the audience from ISC Bangalore?
It's been recorded. No, but we have built up a very...
I'll speak on his behalf.
we have built up a very strong lab. But just quickly coming back to the point Abhijit was making, I'd like to generalize that beyond physics to all other sciences, in that sense that you can never have a good theoretical discipline unless you also have a strong science, technological discipline running side by side. And if you look at the history of science, almost every single discipline has proceeded in that way, in the sense that both of them were experimental work and theoretical work were happening simultaneously. They've never, to my understanding, it's been a very rare case that only one has excelled in the absence of the other. And the way I understand it is we are a very networked community. Developments take place very fast. It is important for the theoretical guy to know what experimental developments are taking place. The experimentalist needs to learn from the theoretical person what he should be looking for, right? I mean, you are most of the time looking for a needle in a haystack. So unless you have a culture where working with hand and that kind of skill is also present, we are never going to be able to catch up. We are always going to be behind. We are going to be behind by decades most of the time. Because you need to know, and just to share a quick anecdote, we got some interesting results. And so we do biophysics work, and I sent it out to a few people. And then they were trying to get theoretical models for that. And I received a couple of models which were totally inaccurate because they had just taken a look at the data, and then they didn't work with us in the process. But whereas I had another friend with whom I kept on meeting at a couple of conferences, one after the other. And then he kept asking me, oh, how did you get this? Did you do this experiment this way, or did you do it that way? And that ended up making all the big difference. And we have currently a model on a few things that I believe we are the few people in the world who have done that. It's about a bacterial cell and how they grow in a small system. But this is the importance of these two disciplines. We must focus on the experimental aspect and the theoretical aspect at the same time. But what does it mean for the common people? I think there is a strong need for children and people who are growing up, who are the next generation, to really start working with, getting your hands dirty, do some experiments, do something even wrong maybe, and just be safe, but don't learn concepts just by memorization. And I remember once I almost set something on fire in my home trying to do electrolysis and generated too much hydrogen. But it taught me a lot of things. So I think as a community, as a country, we should be able to promote that.
Thanks. Before I come with a more basic question specifically to you, I also want to kind of get your opinion on what I'm going to say next, which is that there is a lot of mirroring that happens as we grow up as students. So for example, I remember in the late 70s, early 80s, forget about late 70s, I'm not that old, but a lot of students were actually trying to get into civil services. Then in the late 80s, in the 90s, it suddenly shifted to management. So there is a lot of mirroring that happens. And now let me just give you some data as to where the politicians think science should go in India. And I'm sure that this is going to be mirrored by the students of today. So this is just the year-on-year percentage budget increase of Narendra Modi government. So if you look at the Department of Science and Technology that gets the budget that it then allocates to physics, chemistry, and the basic physical sciences, 2018, 6% increase. If you look at the Department of Biotechnology, 8% increase. 2019, 7% increase. If you look at the Department of Scientific and Industrial Research, which runs the CSIR, which has about 53 odd labs, 7% increase. Last year, only 2% increase. If you look at the Department of Earth Sciences, geologists, 4.7% increase, and last year, 5.6% increase. But if you look at the Department of Space, which comes directly under Narendra Modi, 23% increase, and last year 18.6% increase. So the politicians are very clear as to where they want science in India to go. And it's very difficult now because we're very late in the stage, but had we got this data earlier, maybe all of us would have shifted to space, from archaeology and population genetics to space science. But this is the way science is decided in the country. If you have so much fluctuation in the kind of funding that a political party or a government or a different, or let's say a particular ideological dispensation is giving or distributing, then yes, surely it will affect the intake of the kind of students. It will affect in the type of research India wants to do. And I dare say in the next decade, you will see a huge impetus. I mean, 20% year-on-year increase, 23% is absolutely massive, when for the other fields, you have only 2% increase. So how good is this variance or fluctuation in different fields? Are you for it? Or do you believe that every field of science should get the same amount of money? Let me start with Neeraj, and then I'll come to Abhijit and to Alok.
Yeah, it all depends upon the type of work and needs of our country.
First of all, why do you believe that space is getting so much? Are you irked by it, or are you happy? Are you sad that space is getting so much money?
No, I'm happy for my country, but I'm not happy like why space is so privileged in this aspect. For example, DBT. DBT is meant to work in the field of industrial biotechnology, and it is like heavily funded. And DBT has very less institute also, and all the institutes are heavily funded. But if you will see the output like in the form of patents or technology, that I'm not satisfied with that outputs. So I think we should have a proper generalization of the fundings, and it depends upon the requirement. For example, the archaeological sciences, which is one of the important discipline, and which is like less privileged, and fundings are not available for the like excavations or for the our cultural heritage. So funding should like properly allocated. Yeah.
You want to say something whether all these different areas of science should get the same funding?
Okay, so if you allow me, I'll turn this question a little bit around in the sense that, so I don't have a direct answer as to which department should get how much money, but it should not vary too much, and it should not be decided on immediate impact, because we know that science is long and non-linear, and you never, so there is nothing, not, you know, in ISRO, there is no space scientist as such. There's somebody who's a fluid mechanics expert.
That's such an important point.
It's all engineers.
Exactly. So you have people from many, many disciplines coming together. Civil engineering, somebody has done computer science, everybody has done something else. And they all come together and they're making this great institution. So I would put forward a hypothesis for why this one of these issues is coming up. And that is, what is driving our agenda for science and technology? Why should we fund which project? And currently, I think one of the problems is we are always defining ourselves as a mirror image of the West. We are mirroring the entire nation. Oh, okay, so the next space is coming, we have SpaceX, etc., etc. Let's start putting more money there. We should decide priorities based on what this country might need in 20 years. To just give one quick example, there is a phenomena called megacities. Okay, so the cities which have population of more than 1 crore. In a small area, right? And this is a uniquely Asian phenomena. If you look at the list of megacities, you have all, I think the top, it's dominated by China. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. And then we have Japan and we have India. And these megacities are going to be the drivers of the nation. So what are going to be the problems 20 years from now in these megacities? Can we really afford this larger population? What are the health challenges are they going to face? What kind of communicable diseases? I think your studies which are focusing on diseases which are prevalent in this nation might be extremely helpful in those places, in that context, right? We'd have water scarcity, we have air pollution. So can we start deciding our priorities based on problems this nation is going to face 20 years from now? And that is just it's logical. The taxpayer is funding it. You guys are the ones who are bearing the bill for this. So why not?
And before let me add to this, before I ask for Abhijit's opinion, I'm just playing a devil's advocate. I mean, we are all not communists, right? We are all anti-communism. So when I say that everything all the funds should be equally distributed it may send shivers down the spine of people. So you're the guy who doesn't want competition between various domains of sciences. So here is a devil's advocate throw at you. Why not let different domains of science compete for government funding? What is wrong if you have space competing with biology, competing with physics, and space wins? What is wrong with government giving most of the money to space?
So I believe that the funds come from the politicians and hopefully from a position of leadership in the national interest. So it's not possible to fund all sciences equally. Ideally, one must look at the national interest and what sciences need to be pursued, and based on those requirements, we need to allocate funding in various different proportions. That's the first point. Secondly, I'm happy that we are funding space, and there is a reason for that. You see, everyone's making a rush for the moon. The moon was forgotten for 40 years. Now everyone's rushing back. There has to be a reason for that. One is water. Because see, in the 21st century, the countries that will lead and rule the world are the ones that will invest the most in science and technology and in space. Because all the minerals are going to come from space. There's a ton of minerals out there in the long run. Not tomorrow, not next year, but eventually.
Helium-3.
Exactly. The moon, the regolith of the moon, the surface soil of the moon is rich in helium-3, and helium-3 is a next generation nuclear fuel. It's highly efficient, and it leaves behind very little radioactive fallout. So that is one of the real purposes behind the moon race. Now,
can I just add some
Yes.
data to it? That it requires only 1 metric ton of helium-3 to power the whole of United States for 1 year. And moon has 2 million metric tons of helium-3.
And what we must understand is that we still don't have the technology to utilize that as a nuclear fuel. It's a next generation nuclear fuel. We're going to have to invent the right nuclear reactor in order to use that as fuel. So that's something
Are you saying we are for the first time in living memory thinking not of 5 years ahead, but 50 years ahead, are you saying?
There are certain countries that do that all the time. The Chinese are planning for 2080. I promise you that. They have an integrated space program that looks 50 years in the future. So it's all planned out, it's all integrated. It's not like some haphazard missions here and there. It's all done with a long-term objective in mind. Now, I want to digress a little bit with your permission.
Sure,
the question is, do we need to save science in India, and how do we do that? So let me give you some statistics that may shock you. Now, we have all heard of DRDO, right? Defense Research and Development Organization. How many of us have heard of DARPA? DARPA, DARPA. Right, so DARPA stands for Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. It's a US agency. Coincidentally, both DRDO and DARPA were founded in 1958. As of today, DRDO has an annual budget in US dollar terms of $2.1 billion. DARPA has a budget of $3.4 billion. So it's not very dissimilar. And if you look at DRDO, it does good work, but nothing spectacular. DARPA, on the other hand, is behind almost every single groundbreaking military technology discovery that's been made, and even discoveries that we will not know about for the next 20, 30 years. Now, why is it like this? Why is DRDO not performing when they have so much money? Let's look a little further. DARPA has 240 employees. Guess how many DRDO has? DRDO has 30,000 employees,
Oh my God.
out of which 5,000 are scientists, which means there are 25,000 non-scientists in DRDO eating up the science money. And that is why we need to save science in India. That is it.
Fantastic. That's really startling statistics. Before I come to Neeraj again, as to the value, because as you correctly put it, we might be grumbling out here, give us more money, but ultimately it is the taxpayers' money, it is your money, and it has to be wisely spent. And if you're spending taxpayers' money, if you're not the government, you would be worried about the value that you bring out of it. Governments aren't, but we should be. What is the value that Indian science gives back to the country? Now, let me give you another set of startling statistics, because we are very pleased by the number of patents that we file. So last year, we filed 46,904 patents, which is one of the world's largest patent filing countries. And we were very pleased. In fact, the Minister of Science and Technology congratulated in saying that this is the way to go, because we're basically monetizing Indian science. But as with GDP, what matters is not GDP, but GDP per capita, right? Let me give you the data for international patent applications and that have been granted patents. What matters is not the filings, but the patents that have been granted. USA, 56,595. China, 43,168. Japan, 45,239. Germany, 18,135. Switzerland, 4,365. India, 1,529. So we are filing 46,000 patents. And how many of those patents are worth anything? Forget about worth. They are being granted only 1529. After the granting of the patent, you're not even sure whether you would be able to monetize it. I don't know what percentage of granted patents are finally monetized, maybe 5%, maybe sometimes less, 10%, 20, 30, whatever. So we always forget to look at the bigger picture. And this is where I want to come to Neeraj, because for the kind of science that he is doing, there is no monetization. There is no development of a robot at the end of the day. There is no a hi-fi computer that is going to come out of his science. Many would say, why do I need to fund you, Neeraj? Because I'm not able to monetize what you're doing. You're just discovering something that will be part of textbooks. Can you counter that?
Interdisciplinary work. So we are not only looking for the ancient genomics or a genetic pattern of our prehistoric Indians, but at the same time we are also looking like several aspects of how we have evolved. So our research has a lot of implication in improving the health burden of India. For example, we have published one part of our paper, Rakigadi paper, that has been appeared. But another part of paper that, what was the infections the Harapans used to carry? And what was the genetic makeup? Where they had diabetic markers, whether they had hypertension markers. So there are so many implications of such kind of data. The current, the urgent demand of Indian science is to look after the health burden of our country. So if you look at the Europeans and American countries, they don't have such kind of health burden, what we are carrying in the present scenario. We have huge burden of diabetes, like around 15% Indians are carrying the diabetic genes, either it's in benign form or in the somatic form. We are, because of the high practices of endogamicity. So our genetic makeup is completely different. So we have to understand our genetic makeup, and we have to look after our genetic profiling, early screening of disease.
So have you tied up with, let's say, a hospital or
Yes.
some other?
Yeah. We are working with a lot of hospitals.
Are you
also.
planning to monetize this kind of?
Yes. So we have proposed, because we have screened a lot of modern Indian samples, and we have found a lot of founder effects. Founder means the explosion of a population from a very small number of individuals. So 80% Indian populations are showing high founder effects. The Ashkenazi Jewish and the Finn populations, they are reported to be highly endogamous. And our 40% populations, they are having just double or triple IBD score, we call IBD score, more endogamic than the Finns and the Ashkenazi Jews. And in Finland, all the Finn populations, they have to screen for their genetic diseases. But in India, this program is far away.
Right. So there is a possibility of monetization.
Yes, there is a possibility. And I
let
think
me also give you an example of how fast this field is moving. All of us know about Human Genome Project. It also garnered a couple of Nobel Prizes, but politically, it was a great tool, because if you remember, I think 2001, Bill Clinton and Tony Blair appeared on television live to declare that we have sequenced the human genome. So it took about 12 years. It took about thousands of scientists, thousands of machines. It took about, I think, $80 billion. Right now, today, a human genome, your genome, can be sequenced in 23 minutes, costing $58.
Yeah, I'll add one another example. The Indians are carrying a disease we call cardiomyopathy, sudden cardiac arrest, and the frequency of a mutation which is reported particularly to South Asia, Indians, and the frequency of that mutation is 6%. So the Indians has 6% risk factor for cardiomyopathy, and which is exclusively for Indians. That mutation is not present anywhere in the world, and the screening cost of that mutation is just 400 rupees. You just need to do the PCR. So all these kind of things should be looked after, and it need to be screened. If any like heart patient is going to a hospital, that patient.
But no one knows of this.
But no one knows. So there's a lot of gap. So we have to fill that gap.
Okay.
And there's a disease which is reported in the South Indian population, which called Vaishya from Andhra Pradesh. So last year, so many incidents happened. The Vaishya, a lot of patients were unable to cope up with anesthesia drug, and there were many casualties in Andhra Pradesh. So no one was aware like why these casualties are happening and why the patient is not able to cope up with the anesthesia drug. We have collected about 100 samples, and we have discovered a mutation which is exclusively to that population.
Wow.
So now the time has come for the personalized,
Targeted, personalized medicine.
genomics.
Yes. You know, I've been blasting theoretical scientists for during the duration of this thing, but let me also own up to something, and here I want to bring in Alokda, which is that it is often felt that you require a lot of money to come up with revolutionary ideas. But it is almost always not the case. I mean, most of the great ideas have been worked out. I'm talking of vet biology, vet sciences, minuscule amount of money. It's just a flash of idea that comes, and then you basically conceptualize it, and then you, if I can use the word, actualize it, that it comes out in the open. And the most startling example comes of Carrie Mullis, who got the Nobel Prize for developing PCR, polymerase chain reaction, which is one of the most groundbreaking technology in the last 30, 40 years. And he got the idea while he was stuck in a traffic jam. He'd had a fight with his girlfriend, and he was going from California to some other place. And he rushed back to his lab. He'd had no previous paper except as a student. And he just did those experiments with the prevailing tools that were available to 1 million scientists around the world. And there was nothing spectacular in, he needed a special, so, and then he calculated later on, and it turned out the whole experiment that won him the Nobel Prize actually cost you $210. So here is the question for you. Why are you demanding more money for your research?
I think let's talk about Mysore Pak, and if there's a mutation for that. Okay, so maybe we'll come back to the question of money in a couple of years from now, so you have to call me again. But I think, again, coming back, I think, so the story that you told about this, I'm not aware of this particular story, but there are similar stories. But I always feel as if the common link is the bigger question that you're trying to answer. What is it that we are trying to do in the lab? Why are we trying to do that? And after that, whatever amount of funding is required needs, I mean, obviously there has to be, the scientist has to be able to justify it. But I think the political machinery as well as the bureaucratic machinery should be there to help us, the scientists who are asking good quality questions, relevant questions. And I'm very happy with the space thing as well. We said is that something we should be looking forward to in the 40 years. Defense is another area. But with regards to diseases and all that, right? So if you are asking important questions about what are the effects, then I think the bureaucracy and the political system also needs to be told that these are questions that we are asking not just because we want to do science, not just because we want to keep getting paid, but because we have the larger interest of the nation in our minds. And hopefully then they will understand. And whoever requires that amount of funding can get.
sounded like Sir Humphrey there for a minute. But Abhijit, I want to ask you something that's been wrecking my brain for a long time. Of course, there are domains that are crying out for funding. And one such is when you look at the obvious and you look why we are not doing this. And one of the cases is, incidentally, how many of you know this lady called Lakshmi Kutti? All right, half a hand went up and then it went down. Okay, right, one. Now, Lakshmi Kutti is a lady who recently got Padma Shri. She's about 80 years old. She lives in Kerala. She knows about 530 medicinal herbs. Okay. Now, 3 years ago, a Chinese woman won a Nobel Prize for discovery of artemisinin, which is the drug currently for curing malaria because chloroquine has widespread resistance. She got the Nobel Prize. She published this work, artemisinin, in a journal that had an impact factor of 0.9. Okay, Cell has an impact factor of 40, maybe, yeah, 40. So 0.9 won the Nobel Prize. The kind of funding that we need, Abhijit, would be why not we have 100 Lakshmi Kutti centers where all they do is get her 500 odd herbs, isolate the potent chemical out of it, analyze it, and mass produce it. What is wrong with that? Why is the government not doing that?
I cannot answer that question. But what I can tell you is that in the 1990s, the Chinese government embarked on a series of programs or projects. They were given names related to numbers, Project 983, Project 111, that sort of thing. And they poured in hundreds of billions of dollars into these projects. These were all education and technology related. The objective was to make China independent of the West in terms of technology. And this was a time when China was not the economic superpower it is today. In the 1990s, China was just another middling country. And they had the foresight to pour in hundreds of billions of dollars at that time. And you can see the results today. So what I mean to say is that you're absolutely right. This needs to happen. And even if India may not be a very prosperous country vis-a-vis China today, we need to make the investment today so that we can reap the rewards 20, 30 years down the line. It is imperative that we do that. We need to invest in ourselves. We need to invest in our future. So you're absolutely right. I totally agree.
And the reason why I say this is because this is not really something that needs to be told to the bureaucrat or the machinations of the ministry by a scientist. This should be very obvious that if a plant-derived molecule, artemisinin, can get a Nobel Prize, but forget about Nobel Prize, can actually cure millions of people of a disease, and a person has 500, accumulated over last 50 years, this knowledge of 500, potent herbal medicines. Who knows, there are 20 artemisinins waiting in there.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So there is no scientific discovery in this as such. This has to be tackled by brute force. And we are a country that always talks about Sanjeevani Bhuti, talk of Ayurveda. Let me give you another example. Colonel Chopra, his thing about Reserpine was at one point of time world's largest selling drug. And it was Reserpine is a product from Sarpagandha. He isolated from Sarpagandha 70, 80 years ago. Is one of the only 2 medicines ever to be used by public made by an Indian. The other was Brahmachari, urea still bean for leishmaniasis. So when we have this much of knowledge, we're talking about the diversity of Western Ghats, which is unparalleled. If Lakshmi Kutti has a collection of 500, you venture into Western Ghats, you would probably end up after a decade with a collection of 10,000.
Yeah, I agree. So we found one Ramanujan, but we must have missed 1,000. Yeah. So we found one Lakshmi Kutti, but there must be so many other Lakshmi Kuttis out there with a whole lot of knowledge about our ancient traditions. Because Ayurveda is a tradition that goes back, I would say, several thousand years. And there's a wealth of knowledge in there, and it's proven to work. I mean, the dosages are maybe homeopathic or homeopathic in nature, but what we need to do is that we need to create a database of these herbs that are believed to work, and we need to work on them and isolate the active compounds and try and formulate new medications for various illnesses. So we may make several breakthroughs that way.
Before I throw open the floor for questions, I just need to discuss one very small thing. I think we can't close the discussion without discuss. This is the role of science in Indian society. And sometimes it can be very helpful and sometimes not so, in the sense that society can spring back and punch science so it can go into its little cubby hole. And one example is genetically modified organisms. Now, you know that an Indian discovered GM mustard, but 10, 15 years after the discovery, it has still not been monetized. The fields of this scientist of GM mustard were burnt by NGOs in Rajasthan. And the RSS said, yes, we should go ahead with GM mustard. Then suddenly they turned around because they have a collection of farmers who are against GMO. Then Modi said, yes, we should do it. No, we shouldn't. At the end of the day, the same is the case with BT brinjal. Bangladesh is doing it. We are not doing it. There are farmers in Gujarat who are ready to be arrested. They don't care, but they are using genetically modified cotton seeds. So this is one case where maybe the scientists, do you feel the scientists haven't explained the science enough to the society for the support that they need to be able to monetize this science?
Well, sometimes it's not possible to explain everything, in which case you need governmental support. The government needs to have experts that understand these things, and then you need to make decisions based on the national interest. And they need to be able to withstand political pressure. I mean, you may face the pressure of losing votes in these cases, but you have to take that hit in the national interest. So that's a very simple answer. The government needs to take the call, and it has to take the right call.
Neeraj, would you have any ideas about?
Science for public welfare. I'll give you an example of Kala Ajar. You were talking about Kala Ajar. So the Kala Ajar is endemic to some part of Bihar. And until late 90s, it was not known that how it's spreading, how it's so endemic, how it's so severe in some certain part of Bihar. Two European scholars, they have come and then they have surveyed the area and they have published two back-to-back papers. First paper was that, the upper, it was believed that the lower communities who are not wealthy, they are more prevalent to Kala Ajar. And it was reported and published by Indian scientists. But what they observed is that who are sleeping at the bed, at the cart, they have less chance of having Kala Ajar, and who are sleeping at the ground, they have like more. Because the fly can't fly more than 2 feet. So it was just a simple observation. And they have also counted the number of holes in their net, and they have correlated the prevalence of Kala Ajar. So it's just such a simple science, and that was reported, and now we all know that this mosquito can't fly for more than 2 feet. So this kind of awareness should be there.
Okay. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the only politician who has come out publicly in support of GMO is actually Captain Amrinder Singh. I can't think of any other politician. So maybe, there needs to be a large scale going out of scientists, giving lectures, to the common public, trying to make them understand, and in the process also learning the deficiencies of their own field.
I agree. There needs to be communication of science. Like, for example, in the US, you had Carl Sagan, you have Neil deGrasse Tyson, Michio Kaku. We need to have our own versions of these people. And possibly we are failing somewhere in that, because we need to communicate science to the lay public in a language that they understand, and in a language that, in a manner that really excites them and makes them positively inclined towards scientific discoveries and new inventions.
Thank you very much. Time to take some questions now. Yes, please. Yeah.
From the discussion, what
Can you please point out the person you want to ask the question to, and keep it very short, please. I want to take as many questions as possible.
Yeah, Abhijit.
Okay.
Yeah. So from the discussion, what I understood was there is either a problem in the allocation of science budget, or there is there's not enough funding. The total funds are not enough. So would private funding be useful in this regard?
I'm so sorry, I've completely overlooked talking about this, but absolutely. Private funding in Indian science.
Yes, definitely. Private funding would be very welcome. And the thing is about private funding is that it would be commercial. They would have some commercial applications of that. But there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Private funding powers much of the scientific innovation in the West. So that would be a great thing. The government should create the right environment for this sort of investment to happen and pouring of private funds into science. Yes, I totally agree.
There, lady sitting next to Gautam, not Gautam, but the lady sitting next. Okay, after you.
You were talking about the funding to separate branches
First
of
of all,
science.
a big round of applause to this young lady for.
You, I'm not sure who to direct the question to, but you were discussing the amount of money set aside for different branches of science. I mean, what if the scientists or someone a part of the country voted for which branch of science they wanted to develop?
Okay. Right. So basically, science should be part of the election process, and then various people should vote for. Neeraj, what do you have to say to
It's a wonderful idea. I really appreciate your question and concern. And I do agree. This kind of, not completely, but some kind of voting should be there.
But for the first time in my life, I would have to forsake Nota. That means I would have to vote for. Alok, you have anything to say for this, sir?
I mean, I won't fully agree with this because, I mean, the problem with science is you don't really know what's going to happen tomorrow, and it needs really experts who have vision beyond the present to figure out what is needed to be funded, what is important. And that takes, it's all about learning and maturity, and to some extent, the question of vision comes in, and that takes time, and that is not there with everybody. So that while public participation of telling us what is important is good, but at the same time, we do need feedback from experts on this.
Yes, there, lady.
So my question is for the panel, and somebody raised private funding already, and I really appreciate the younger's question there as well. And I think I'm just building on that. One of the big aspects of saving science is around human capital, and a big stakeholder in that is the parent in India, who is very involved in encouraging their children to go in a particular direction. And somehow science and scientific achievement is not sexy enough. Space today is, so you already see conversation, you said it yourself. I wish I knew space funding was there, I would have gone there. So how do we involve the parent in it? Private funding exists there. Parents are funding children for golf. Why are they not funding for that? How do we unlock that thinking around the opportunity of parents wanting to get involved and push science? And there's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, fantastic. Can I just deviously turn this question around and have a show of hands? How many of you in the audience out here are all right if your relatives, children, do undergraduate degree in science and then go for an MBA? All right. Okay, not very many. So we have a good collection of people out here. Not to say that, leaving your stream of science and then doing MBA is anything bad. But I dare say it would be much easier to not quite teach the students, but to make spread this awareness in students than in parents. I think I don't know what role parents would have to play, or what role government has to play in making the parents aware. That's I haven't really thought about that. Have any of you thought about this? Making the students aware is hard enough as it is now.
Yeah.
To add parents to it.
And rather than telling the student what to do, let them explore various things. See, if you let them do 10, they don't have the time to do 10. So they'll figure out the one they really like. And rather than going...
She's talking about the parents, not the students.
But the parents, what they should do, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But I think that has to come from within the parents, to be honest, because I think the reality is, you yourself put it, there is a easier thing in front of you, which is that you would get rich soon, you would lead a comfortable life, and on the other hand, you have years and decades of struggle. So I'm not too sure. Yeah, sorry.
The thing is that science doesn't have to be this path of renunciation. It should not be a path of renunciation, of staying poor. If you look at the Western countries, scientists do get rich. Even a university professor makes $100,000+ a year. So what we need is, we need an environment in this country. We need the government and to create a system, to create an environment in which even scientists are paid well. So we need funds, basically. That's what it is.
Gautam has a question.
This whole thing about funding and proportionality with the various fields, and therefore children taking those particular fields and at the cost of other fields, I don't think that's the way to look at funding at all. I think there are some things that require more, some that don't. And if you think, Anand, that more the funding and therefore more the number of people and that you may have or somebody else would have chosen space, then I think we are chasing mediocrity and not calling of scientists, which is a very idiosyncratic. It's almost like musicians. So that's a very short comment I wanted to make. I mean, just because I'm a guitarist and there is more money in a keyboard, I wouldn't leave my guitar. My question is an extremely short question, and I hope to make all of you very uncomfortable with it, and that is, where are the women in science? They're not.
In fact, I was searching for the data so that I can tell it to you. This is something that, again, I'm so sorry we forgot to discuss. Women in science. It's just a pathetic situation we have in our country. I had the ISC Bangalore pathetic data, but I can't locate it. ISC Bangalore is at the forefront of not hiring women as faculty. But if you look at the number of vice chancellors, only 3% of all vice chancellors are women. If you look at the faculty positions of all over India, only 18% of faculty all over India, all the universities, private and public, are women. But if you look at, I'm talking of biology fields, I don't know about the other fields. If you look at the biology fields and the PhD and the MScs, about 60% are women. So what happens? They finish their graduate degree and then either do they leave science, or are they not taken up into faculty positions? I think this is something that the government really has to, we can't just go by that tremendous photograph of, the Mars mission and the Kanjivaram, mommies hugging each other and saying all is fantastic, we encourage women in science. That is actually not the case. And the situation is catastrophic in engineering institutes. I mean, you only have to go to IITs and you see that there are hardly any women students, hardly any women faculty. Dare I suggest reservations? How acceptable would you find reservations for women in science, in faculty, as well as in graduate positions?
I am
We've
all
run out
for.
of time.
This is just the last answer.
So I would say that I am all for equality of opportunity. Everybody should get the same opportunity, and then let people decide. I am not an expert on this, but I've heard that genders do have certain aptitudes. Certain fields are more preferable to men. Certain are more preferable to women. So what we need to have is to ensure equality of opportunity, and that should do it. I mean, if there are fewer women in engineering, even after giving equality of opportunity, then maybe there's some other reason behind it.
Just as a parent, I think there's a lot of discussion about do we really encourage our children for science. And I think in India, if you look at what can we offer to our children, apart from some of the science cities that we have in various towns, pretty average and mediocre. And they're all visual, there's no experience as such. And if I look at, let's say, Washington, you have Smithsonian. So if you look at Houston or you go to Singapore, I think science is not about theory. It's not about kind of reading something in class. I don't know what can be done about it, but it would be great to hear, your thoughts about that.
Yes, science begins with the motivation, right? I mean, if a kid is motivated to travel to the stars or to look at pictures of space, if the child is able to find something motivational, something that is visible and tangible, then they will be definitely more attracted towards doing science. And they will think of science as something heroic. So we need to create an environment where you can see scientific achievement and see the possibilities and the fascination that science evokes in us. So that obviously is not there in India. We don't see any tangible demonstration of science, and we need to have that. We need to definitely do that.
But are you for reservations for women in science?
No.
What about you, Neeraj?
I also don't think so.
No? Alok?
I think reservations create a mutual distrust that the other person has also gone through the same process. And there's a certain fellowship of competition when the other person also comes through. And
So you're not for reservations?
I don't think that's a great
Can I have
idea.
a show of hands of people who are for reservation for women scientists in faculty positions? No?
I think, so because I've been associated with the program with DST started about 2 years ago, they're trying to encourage more women in engineering. And IIT Guwahati has been doing something on this. It's not about having reservations for women or girls. It's about encouraging them in different ways. So you need to have programs, and I think all universities and local colleges need to have programs where they are nurturing women and encouraging them to pursue their dream, which within science and engineering, in the 10th and the 12th grade. Those grades, rather than looking to have reservations for them.
Right.
And maybe probably this year we would know the first batch, which was mentored for the past 2 years, they would be giving their exams and they would know the results of what is going to happen about that.
Right. So I end on a very, I think
Okay,
the
just
mic is
one-
going to be snatched. So
Okay.
yeah. Sure, but let me right. Let me end on a good note. 10 seconds. That when it comes to gender disparity, there is a country that is worse than us. Can you guess which country? Japan. So we're not that bad. On that note, I would like to thank all my fellow panelists and your audience for fantastic. Thank you so much.
So I think we can begin with the last session of the second edition of Republic Pondi Lit Fest. This is a bit of a classroom session. The reason I suggested to Anand that maybe we could wind up with a small illustrative talk on why liberalism has failed is because there needs to be intellectual clarity among those who see themselves, for want of a better word, as non-left. I will explain later why I'm saying non-left. It is important to learn lessons from the spectacular collapse of liberalism around the world. And essentially, the idea is not to repeat those very mistakes. Sometime in 1960, that is 40 and 20, 60 years ago, a book was published. It was a collection of essays, and it took the world by storm. It was called The End of Ideology. And the subtitle of the book read, Political Ideology has become, on the exhaustion of political ideas in 1950s. So we had the war, we had a huge churn of ideas. Fascism was defeated. Nazi Germany was defeated. A decisive victory happened over those pernicious ideologies. Having won the battle, or having won the splendid victory, a consensus began emerging among leading intellectuals that political ideology has become irrelevant among sensible people. The stress was on the word sensible people. Sensible. This was essentially because at that point of time, nobody could intellectualize the rise of communism and the rise of the Soviet Empire. We are talking of the 1950s. And the Stalin era was thought to be a passing phase. But that didn't happen. What did happen was the rise of liberalism, the rise of a liberal world order. We had global institutions coming up, the United Nations, its various offspring, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank. And broadly, there was a consensus among nations that the underpinning of the global order would be liberal. And the word liberal, then you could ask, why did they pick on the word liberal? Because it was from the classical liberalism that existed or that took shape with the birth of enlightenment that became the inspiration for the new world order. And that liberalism was all about reforming. It was all about restructuring. It was about questioning. And it was about keeping alight the lamp of freedom and liberty. I would just use a small example. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it was amended. It was amended to include the fundamental, indivisible, inalienable right to property. Now, you may not automatically connect right to property with freedom and liberty. But the index of freedom and liberty across the world, if you test it out today, is the highest in those countries where the right to property is treated as an inviolable right. Putting it very crudely, if you are in America, the owner of a property would tell you either you get off my property or I will shoot you. That is the strong sense of ownership which exists over there. If you move across the Atlantic, in Europe you have the right to property, but it then gets gradually classified with what kind of right attached to what kind of property. And here the index begins faltering. So countries which have absolute right to property are very high on the freedom index, and then it begins declining. In today's context, as the world debates, discusses, deliberates on possibly the biggest technology switchover we are going to witness, at least I am going to witness in my lifetime, that is 5G. Right to property becomes a very important issue. Because property today is not defined only by the house you own or the apartment you own or the land you have purchased or inherited. Your property is now also your data set. The data each one of us generates is our property. Sadly, while the rest of the world is debating the ownership right of that data, in India, government has assumed that it is government's property. And that is because when our constitution was written, when it was framed, we had various shades of opinion, political opinion, views. I wouldn't use the word ideologies, but definitely various shades of political views and beliefs in the Constituent Assembly. But they made it a point to include right to property as a fundamental right because that was believed to be the cornerstone of freedom, liberty, and the two taken together, liberalism and a liberal government structure, a liberal state. Subsequently, we know along with the right to property, we also had as a fundamental right free speech, which is equally important to have a liberal democratic order or system. We know how the First Amendment was brought about to restrict free speech to reasonable restrictions. The word reasonable was never explained or defined, and free speech became limited speech. In emergency, all our fundamental rights were suspended, emergency was lifted, all the fundamental rights were restored except one right, the right to property. To go back in time, the post-war liberal order, which sustained through much of the Cold War years, and in fact, the collapse of the Berlin Wall was seen as the ultimate triumph, the final triumph of what was predicted in 1960, that the age of ideologies is over and we are now living in a world which is free of ideological constraints and burdens. The fall of communism, the fall of the Soviet Empire was seen as the final vindication of what was said in 1960. Yet that did not happen either. Between the fall of the Berlin Wall and the rise of globalization, we had a surge of liberalism, and then as the limits of globalization began to take shape and form, we begin to see the decline of the liberal order and the decline of liberalism as an idea. Three things happened. Globalization, which was supposed to be a great equalizer, did not deliver the equality it had promised. Two, the characteristics of classical liberalism, that you are tolerant, that you are open to ideas, that you are open to debate, deliberation, discussion, that you believe in free exchange of thoughts, that you believe in freedom of speech. Those began to they began withering. They began to wither, and as they withered one by one, spaces opened up for alternative ideas. Free speech became monopoly over speech. So I am the liberal and I lay down the line. If you disagree with me, I will not allow that disagreement. Similarly, we had the same thing happening with opinion in academics, even in India. Spaces began to close. And it was a new iron wall that descended. And that iron wall entrenched the left into positions that were not defensible. They could not defend them. We often see things in terms of left, right, center. But if you go back in time, that these two ideas of left and right really emerged during the French Revolution, where you had the old assembly. And those who were with the revolution, they sat on the left of the president of the assembly. And those who were against the revolution, they sat on the right of the assembly. When the new assembly was formed 3 years later, a third row was created. That was for the moderates, and that was the center. In today's circumstances, this kind of categorization of left, right, center has become largely illusional. Just because you believe in indigenous culture does not necessarily make you cultural right. Avoid that tag. Avoid that tag because that tag is designed to put you into a silo. If you must want to be known for being different from what the left and subsequently the left liberal order stood for, change your economic worldview. Earlier we had Congress socialism. Now we are seeing Hindu socialism. So we don't need that. Hindu socialism doesn't make you economically right. Push for political reforms that cannot wait anymore. Push for legislative reforms. Why is it that we do not have a Prime Minister's questionnaire in Parliament? Why is it that we elect 3 layers of government and yet we do not demand accountability from any one of these 3 layers? The old order is what the liberal order had designed. And there are severe cracks in that system. And that is where the challenge lies, where you have to question the system, you have to push for change, and let that change be radically different from what existed. Taking off from that is the surge of disruptive politics around the world, across Europe. Conservatives are in turmoil. Liberals are in turmoil. The left is being rejected. And what is emerging is a challenge both for people, for the systems, and for the whole world. Prime Minister Modi's victory did not happen in a vacuum. Donald Trump did not win in a vacuum. Established liberal politicians in Europe did not fall and bite dust in a vacuum. So the point which I'm trying to make is that there is a churn happening, there is a churn in politics, there's a churn in culture, in society. And we must, if we see ourselves as an alternative thought process, if we see ourselves as rejecting that which the world at large has rejected, then we must become active participants in that churn and make the most of it. So where does the Pondi Literature Festival come into this? When Anand and I were invited to curate this year's festival, we decided on some set of criteria that we will follow this criteria while selecting or inviting people. And one of them was that the participants should be young. They should be people with new ideas, new voices, new thoughts. And then there should be also people who have been around and who have the wisdom, the knowledge to share and to pass it on. So we had young kids, including two friends of mine who did this excellent, I call it rap, you call it what? Spoken word poetry. And we had Mr. Vikram Sood. So we need to bridge this vast demographic expanse that exists in this country, and we need to bring in more. Yesterday we heard Sanjeev explain how one tribe in Haryana, living on the banks of the river Saraswati, the tribe is called Bharat. The Bharat tribe goes and conquers 11 tribes and then 3 more tribes. And having conquered them, what do? They don't go and kill the people they have conquered. They sit down and they draw a list of all the good things that can be absorbed, that can be adapted and adopted. So we have to be inclusive. I mean, a point which I have been making repeatedly. If you say that you are a nationalist, for you, the nation begins in Kashmir and ends with Kanyakumari. You cannot be selective that I am a nationalist but only for this much. If you are a nationalist, your people are the 1.3 billion people of India. You can't be selective. You can't be selective and say that I am a nationalist and my people are only these people. If you are a nationalist, you have to place a certain value to ideals. And lastly, I will quote, since we are in the land of Sri Aurobindo, I will quote from his Uttarpara speech. I mean, it is not that he was writing for this purpose, but it's very apt. He writes, whatever clouds may come, whatever dangers and sufferings, whatever difficulties, whatever impossibilities, there is nothing impossible, nothing difficult. I am in the nation and its uprising, and I am Vasudeva. I am Narayana, and what I will shall be, not what others will. What I choose to bring about, no human power can stay. Don't become like them. Don't shut doors. Don't shut your windows. Engage. The biggest joy lies when you begin as 5 and end of the day you are 10. Thank you very much, and God bless you. I would also like to thank the organizers, Partho, Alo, young Ajit, Rajkala, for giving us the chance to curate this festival. It was stressful work. I will be lying if I said that it wasn't stressful, but end of the day, both Anand and I are happy. I hope, Anand, you are happy. And we are satisfied, and we wish you all the best for 2020. And may PLF take off and be the biggest festival of India. Thank you once again.
I have been asked to propose the vote of thanks. At the outset, I have to tell you that I'm not a communist, but I am an egalitarian. It's very, very difficult to make a list, least of all a hierarchical list as to who I should thank for what has just about finished this very moment. And therefore, to me, it is, to me, everybody is a VVIP, and therefore, I would like to thank, on behalf of the entire Team PLF, everybody who accepted our invitation to share with us their thoughts, to every single member of the audience who took out their time and attended the festival, and to innumerable invisible people who throughout the year, since last year, have encouraged us, guided us to bring about this festival that you have seen in the last 3 days. I am incapable of singling out names. Please do not take this wrongly. It is in the best possible spirit of things. As I said, everybody to me is a VVIP, and each and every one of you who were on the podium, in the audience, in the technical teams, and every single aspect of organizing this festival has our gratitude. Thank you. That's Team PLF. The volunteer is Team PLF. Thank you.
Vande Mataram, Vande Mataram. Tumi vidya, tumi dharmo, tumi ridi, tumi mormo. Tumi vidya, tumi dharmo, tumi ridi, tumi mormo. Tvam hi prana sharire, bahute tumi ma shokti, hridoye tumi ma bhakti, bahute tumi ma shokti, hridoye tumi ma bhakti. Tomari pratima gori mondire, mondire. Tvam hi Durga dasha praharana dharini, kamala kamala dana biharini. Tvam hi Durga dasha praharana dharini, kamala kamala dana biharini. Vani vidya dayini, namami tvam, namami kamalam, amalam atulam, sujalam sufalam. Mataram, Vande Mataram. Vande Mataram. Shamalam Saralam Sushmitam Bhushitam Karanim Bharanim Mataram Vande Mataram Vande